Hello, and welcome to another episode of Leader Generation brought to you by Mata. I'm your host, Tessa Burg, and today I'm excited to welcome Irina Kulikova. She's a global business leader at Estee Lauder, and we are excited to jump in to a few topics that are trending now, but are going to be a focus for marketers and business leaders moving forward, including what does it mean to be a customer-centric business, and what will be the state of beauty, state of retail in general as we enter 2026 in an ever evolving era of AI and massive technological development. So, Irina, thank you so much for joining us today. We're excited to have you.
Hi, Tessa, and I'm very happy to join this broadcast and happy to share my experience.
So, you have had quite a journey, very impressive background, and you have been a marketing and executive leader for a long time, over 2 decades, which is just incredible. Tell us a little bit about your background and your journey to Estee Lauder.
Absolutely. I actually joined Estée Lauder 5 years ago. Now, this December, that's exactly 5 years. And prior to that, I spent most of my career in strategy consulting. And I worked on very different projects with the strategic focus, transformation, but also go-to-market, marketing, different types of things, and across various industries, because I started as more as a generalist working on various types of projects and industries. But then in the last years, I've been focusing primarily on luxury, fashion, beauty, retail, consumer products to a certain extent. And I worked across different markets, including Russia, Middle East, UK, and some others. And few years ago, when that was exactly during the COVID time, I left consulting to join the industry. I started my career many years ago, back then, right after the university with L'Oreal. That was my first job, and I started in trade marketing. And somehow, to like many years in consulting, I rejoined the beauty industry, which I'm very much passionate about because it has a lot of interesting elements, which I appreciate a lot. It's the industry which is in between for me, consumer goods and a fashion luxury type of industries, because it has these dynamics of the consumer goods type of industry, but at the same time it has all like the interesting elements of the luxury fashion, like with the beautiful models, with all these like amazing products, amazing advertising campaigns, etc. And
Yeah,
yeah, and maybe to just to complete my background in Estée Lauder currently, I work on multiple topics. So I work on strategy for the company, specifically for Europe, UK, and emerging markets, as well as transformation. But also I'm focusing on consumer insights, market intelligence, pricing, and various different types of projects, whether it's entering the new channel or entering a new market, bringing the brand to a specific market, etc.
I think it's funny when you said that beauty has the best of retail and then all sort of the fun stuff with models and great campaigns and being out there as a brand. That's actually what my kids think I do. Every time they see a commercial, they're like, "Oh, mom, were you a part of that?" I'm like, "No," but it is why I love working in marketing and advertising. Even though I'm on the data and tech side, I love that the output of really understanding the customer, how they operate, their behaviors, does eventually lead to an amazing and fun commercial or creative campaign. I'm just not personally developing them. Wish I was. So let's dive into that a little bit more about, the data, the insights. We're seeing a lot of companies put out statements that this year they're going to be customer centric or customer obsessed. In your experience at Estee Lauder, or really companies even before then, because you've always been working in strategy and transformation, what does that mean? And what are some of the elements of successful customer obsessed or customer centric companies?
I think from my previous experience, the big element of this consumer or customer obsession is that when you start every single meeting or every single project, you actually start with your consumer. You think first about your consumer, not about the financials, because the financials will come and will follow as long as you bring all the right elements for your consumer. And this consumer first mindset, like every single time, that's actually what defines the consumer-centric company. And then, of course, when you have this consumer-centric mindset, you build all the right infrastructure and all the right elements, which helps you to know more about your consumer, right? And you mentioned a lot about the basically the consumer studies, the consumer research, all this like analytics, etc. I mean, I live with it as well. Like that's part of my job because when I look at the consumer insights part of my role, that's exactly what my team and I are working on. And we are bringing this to life, even in those markets where we don't have a lot of consumer data, but we really need to understand what consumer is doing, how they are feeling about our brands, where they are shopping, what kind of like channels they are using to learn about the brand, etc. So there's a lot of different types of indicators which actually help us to understand what's the right way to approach this consumer. And on the top of this, like with a lot of AI tools at the moment, you can also look into more details, analyze a lot of data around also like the social listening type of things, the trends, analytics, etc. So there's a lot of information that you can bring on the table from the different parts of the organization as well, including the consumer care, like what our consumers are complaining about, because that's also part of the study and the journey of understanding like how do you build this consumer experience where consumers don't have to complain, then they're happy with what they're receiving, they're happy with the brands, they're happy with the services, etc. So you're totally right. There's a lot of elements, right, in terms of consumer insights, consumer study, consumer analytics will help you to get this information about the consumer. And once you get this information, the next step is to build all your processes with consumer experience that you want to reach in mind. Even your front office part, it's quite obvious, right? Of course, you need to think about how consumer will see your store, your brand, how your beauty advisors will approach the consumer, what they will say, and but there's also the back office part, which you also need to build with the intention to have the right processes for the consumer journey and for the consumer experience.
I think a lot of companies would say that their vision and mission is to be consumer first and say things and give lip service to, well, we're only in business to serve our customers, so of course we're consumer first. But I would challenge listeners that if you start a campaign based on when a new product's going to be ready to launch and when you are going to go into the market, or based on a goal that you have to reach or the company has to reach in order to meet stakeholder expectations, that when we start with that, here's what we need to accomplish internally, or here's our timelines on when R&D is going to be finished or new products going to be finished, that takes away from being truly customer centric. And what you're proposing is that you really look at what is to differentiate on the experience that you're delivering. How have you seen that pattern before where people say they're customer centric, but really they're like, oh my God, we're going to launch on this day and I want to blast out an email to everyone, or I want to like tell everybody about this because I just finished this work. And how can people make that change while still being able to measure that the focus on customer experience does generate revenue and growth for the business?
Well, I'll tell you something. I mean, you don't start with the product in general. There's a consumer before the product, right? Everything that you build as a new product, ideally, you have the consumer which actually have the need for this product, right? And you're looking into what consumer needs, what the consumer trends. If you look at the indie brands right now, which are very successful in beauty industry, they are very much monitoring the trends and they understand what the consumers want and they bring their products quickly to market in line with these trends and in line with this consumer expectation. So this is basically this reverse cycle. First, you see what your consumers are looking for. You understand, what the needs, especially like the younger generations of Gen Z. You think of what it means in terms of your new product development. You bring this product to the market, but meanwhile, you also need to understand what are the channels of consumers use to learn about the product, what are the right influencers, when is the right moment for this product, because probably that's not the right moment. Again, like you've been building this product, but there might be, tons of other products coming on the market at the same time, and you might even have difficulties to differentiate it. So you also have to look into what's going on in the market, whether consumers are still passionate about this product, or maybe like you also need to think on how to position it in a different way, because sometimes you may have amazing product that you built with some ingredients, etc., and one specific ingredient is trending at the moment, but not the other one, and then how you position it, how you bring your product to the market. It's also like knowing what the consumer wants at this point. What is it like, what is important for consumer, which kind of benefits, which kind of ingredients, etc.
I
But
like
it's, in any case, like as you said, you need to plan everything with your consumer first mindset. And then you don't have a question like whether it's just like, oh, okay, I'll bring something which is like super cool at the market in this moment, etc., etc. Because it's very difficult to bring something on the market where you don't have the right demand from the consumer, and that's probably not something that consumers need at this point. You might spend a lot of money, but you might not get exactly the results that you want.
Yeah, and I like that you said you have to see what the consumers are doing. I mean, there's so many different ways to see behaviors and patterns, but sometimes it even means like getting out into the world, really talking to them, looking
Mm.
at channels online and offline, and understanding the drive behind the behavior. And that can be like a massive unlock and is a very human activity. We can use AI to gather all the data to help expedite analysis, to pull out suggestions. But I think true customer centric businesses and customer centric leaders are actually also there in partnership with consumers and continuously asking, why are they having this blocker? I always think of it as if if people go into a store, and especially in beauty, there's aisles and aisles of options. And let's
Yeah.
say, your conversion rate is 10%, then getting curious about what happened to the other 90%. Like, and
Yeah.
that's where you could start to pair that in-house experience. Is it the merchandising and the shelving? Is it not reading the moment and emphasizing the right ingredients, emphasizing the right positioning? But I love that part of the exercise of really trying to understand the 90% of no, instead of the trap that I see a lot of businesses fall into, which is just trying to think about how to get from that 10% to 11% to 13% and just increase conversion.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And for me, I always, when I thought about consumer in the past, also in some of the projects that I did in the past, there's always like this magic of the big data, right? And you have a lot of different types of statistics, data, etc., which you can analyze and you can derive a certain trends, etc., which is great. But the real magic sometimes happen with what is called like small data, like the observations that you can make in the store, for example, like how your consumer, for instance, move in the store, what they look at, what they like, what they don't like. And from the simple conversations that you might have with the consumers, with a certain group, like focus groups, etc. This is more kind of like a small type of data, right? Because you have like a smaller group of
Mm.
people with whom you're having this conversation and you're making the observations. Or as you rightly said, like, you may have like 10% of yes, but then there's 90% of no. Why? That also gives you a certain answers in terms of like what consumers do not like. But it's true that we sometimes behind all like this massive data analytics, etc., we forget about very simple things which you can only observe when you're in the store, for instance. And whether then I was in L'Oreal is my first job, there was I found it is a very good practice in the company back then that whomever going to work in marketing was supposed to spend the first 6 months going to the stores and being a sales representative and basically observing how the store works from the operation perspective, but also having an opportunity to see the consumers, etc. And in the same way, in the current company as well, I see this opportunity for people to go and work in the store for a few days or even for one day. You're actually getting so much information from this. Also from some of the previous clients of Bain when I worked in consulting. I've observed it all the time for the retailers, for instance, then the CEO of the company or the general manager of the company would spend time during the weekend to go to the store and, and look what's going on in the store and taking these data into account as opposed to just all like the financial, the cool
Yeah.
tables, etc., that you see on the slides. And another thing which I really like in, for instance, Net Promoter Score, right? The NPS, which was also like introduced like many years ago by Bain, and which is used by the companies quite a lot in order to understand and have this clarity in terms of how consumers feel about their specific product or about their specific store. There is always an element of when leadership team and some of the companies also use the opportunity to call their consumers directly. And I observed it again in the past when the CEO or like the general manager would just take the phone and call one of the consumers who is actually detractor or another way who is a promoter, just to understand why they like the brand of the company or why they don't like it and what has to be changed.
Mhm.
So all these elements together, that creates much better understanding of your consumer in general.
So how do you take that deep understanding of the consumer and the insights and translate it into a truly unique and ownable brand experience?
Well, there are different ways of leveraging consumer insights, right? Because also you need it for different reasons. One, for instance, when you have your campaign, like advertising campaign, you have like great materials that you develop, like the potential model selection or the potential visuals. You actually can use the consumer panel or like also the smaller focus group, depending again on what you try to clarify, to have this view from the consumers whether they associate themselves with the specific assets or like for the campaign of the specific model of the specific visuals, etc. That actually gives you pretty good understanding, and you in the same way you can also do like the online testing, like when you like leveraging some of the assets to understand how the consumers react on this. So that's one of the ways of doing things. Then the other thing is obviously when you're building when you're developing the new products, you really need to have this consumer input in terms of what are the let's say the shades of the lipstick that will be popular in the next months, and what are the trends in terms of because sometimes it's the colors, but it's also the texture, like whether it's like a stick or whether it's like the blush, which is more kind of like the powder type of thing. So you try to understand which kind of products you want to develop, which will be popular with the consumer by taking into account the analysis of the trends. And that's quite often like you do using also AI, as I mentioned, and looking through the social media with the most trending like TikTok videos, what people starting to talk about, etc., etc. So trying to really to see trends in the future. Then, of course, I mean, like if you have your net promoter score regarding your stores, and you clearly see what consumers like or they don't like, you can action it quickly in your stores. Sometimes it might be a systematic problem for all your stores, or sometimes it might be like specific to one store, and you can fix it. I mean, from my previous experience, it was one of my projects in the past when we did a net promoter score for a big hypermarket player. We discovered that, for instance, there was not enough space. Like consumers were complaining constantly, there's not enough space in the parking, or the toilets were all like closed or something like this. This is something which is very specific to this store, and you can solve it potentially quickly, right? But that would dramatically increase potentially your consumers' satisfaction with the experience in the store. Or the other thing, like the consumers were not finding specific products because there were no proper indication where they can find it. So they were spending a lot of time going through the store trying to find a specific category, which could have been solved pretty easily if you just put the right indicators there. So these type of signals, like, you take them into account, and you can actually solve the whole problem of the consumer journey in the store. So very different ways of using. Then, of course, I mean, for media, right? Like you decide on which media channels you're gonna leverage for your advertising campaign to get the max return on investment. But that's also pretty much based on the consumer data, because you do You have your consumer data. The media agency normally do all this classification, putting the channels, which consumers are there, which profiles, etc., etc., and then you decide on where you invest your money in order to bring this advertising to your consumer that you want to target. I mean, many different ways of like consumer data is basically everywhere, across the whole organization. You can leverage consumer data to build the processes around it in the right way and to get the most of efficiency.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. We've seen AI have such a big impact on businesses, but for the most part, what's really taking up the headlines is using AI to cut costs. Uh,
Mm.
there's been staff reductions, and people have said it is because of AI or because of automation. But in everything you're saying, it's really the benefit of AI is to better understand the consumer and be able to react to those signals and changes and trends faster and to expedite resolving points of tension in their journey. Uh, what other big areas have you seen AI impact the beauty industry either this year, or what do you see it impacting next year as we head into 2026?
I think what you mentioned is totally right, right? You use AI, of course, to improve efficiency and also to cut costs. That's not, but the thing is, it's not the only use, right? And it's probably not the primary use because as a company, you're normally interested in growing your top line and everything that helps you to bring your retail sales and your net sales to the higher level. It's very important, but at the same time, of course, you're also managing your net operating profit, and this is where you need to cut costs. So, like, you can apply AI in both direction. And as I said, that there is a front office and there is a back office, right? So if you take marketing, from the marketing perspective, even you can use AI in both directions, right? So using AI to better understand the consumer and the massive amount of data help you basically to better target your consumer to create the right products from even like you can use AI to develop the formulations for your products, knowing which ingredients are most efficient for the specific consumer needs, etc., and going through all the library of the ingredients using the AI models to pick the right things and do the right formulations. But then, as we mentioned, you can also select the right channels. You can basically bring the efficiency of your money to the different level with AI. And at the same time, for instance, when you do your creative assets, you can potentially dramatically reduce the costs. Because just imagine in the past, you used to, let's say, produce your creative assets making like the photos in the different locations with the different models, like with the different product setups. Now using AI, you can actually from one shoot you can build multiple options that you can use for the different online retailers, or like you can change the model, for instance, but keep the setup, or you can change the setup and keep the model, or the same from the product perspective. So that's both the cost saving because it's cheaper compared to what it used to be before, but at the same time it's also the opportunity to grow your sales with producing like a bigger number of assets. Then, of course, everything that is related, for instance, to quality control, also in the supply chain, you can also use the AI to do better quality control of the products. So that's a different way of how you can cut the costs as well. But at the same time, you also ensure that you have less of your products coming back to you, and the consumer satisfaction is much higher potentially because you don't have faulty products once you receive them. So there really AI is everywhere across the organization, starting from the marketing piece, from the content creation piece, supply chain. It's also in your financial analytics and strategy, like framing certain problems, like you can leverage definitely AI to analyze the massive amount of information and data to come up with a future framework for your strategy, for instance. So many ways of applying AI. But the other thing, I think, what is really important to take into account is not only how we as a company use AI, but it's also how consumers use AI, because this is where you need to build this knowledge and understanding. And there is a lot of consumers which use AI today in the store, for example, instead of either dermatologist advice or the beauty advisor advice, because they have their chat GPT or, whatever it is, like Perplexity, whatever they use with them. And they just look at the product on the shelf and they ask like whether this product will actually benefit their skin or like whether that's the right product for them because they have a specific things, like allergy or whatever it is. So they even check the ingredients, like which ingredients are great, which are not, so all these things. And I think more than, at least like the statistic that I've seen that more than 50% of Gen Z population actually using today ChatGPT and different types of similar models to when they are doing the beauty shopping. And this is where the companies need also to be smart in a way on how they bring the right recommendations to the consumer and their products are not lost, even if these are the most amazing products and they could have been super helpful for the consumer needs in terms of the benefits for the skin and the problem solving for the skin.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question was, what is the difference between how generations use AI and are there any new emerging channels because AI exists? Like, for example, the way that I use social media and the social media channels I have are dramatically different than my teenage daughter. And like even the way that we look at and use Chat GPT is different. And what makes from the technical side, when I think about those differences, you really have to understand the why behind it's different and the context in which they're using it in order to optimize your content to show up consistently and accurately across channels. Because a lot of people don't know that if you prompt chats or LLMs differently, you're going to get different answers. And there is a lot of inaccuracy. So I guess I have a two-part question. Are there new channels emerging as people start to set preferences and do those change or are there differences by generation? And then how can businesses make sure they're taking that into account when they're looking to optimize their content and brand experience to still deliver in a consistent manner?
To answer your first questions on the new channels, yes, in general, the new channels are emerging, but this is not related necessarily to AI only. It's more about the generational preference in a way people shop, or some of the, for instance, one of the channels which has been emerging in beauty and has been growing quite significantly, particularly in Europe, is pharma channel recently. And the reason for that was also the situation with COVID, and pharmas were open for people to buy and they started to source from there also their beauty products. And somehow also with this element of people looking for the efficiency and for the solutions for their problem and their skincare products, pharma channel became one of the channels where out of a sudden a lot of people started to buy more and more beauty products. But that's not exactly AI related. It's more related in terms of the specific trends and changes which are happening in the way people shop and what they're looking for. But then from the younger generation perspective, like more than 90% of the younger generation today, like Gen Z, they are using TikTok. And this is why the TikTok is emerging one of the shopping channel as well, which was not in the past. Like, but currently, TikTok Shop is one of the channels that people really do like. They really acquire and they purchase things, etc. So that's obviously another example. Then online channel in general, I think the whole like Amazon topic that Amazon is not a new thing, but there is more and more beauty purchases which are actually also happening in Amazon and other online channel because prior to COVID, beauty was predominantly for many countries, it was predominantly brick and mortar channel. Like, the people were buying the beauty products in the stores because they wanted to try it. They wanted to make sure, like, for instance, especially your makeup products it looks nice on you, like it works well for your skin, but also with artificial intelligence, like with COVID, with all these different types of trend, the online channel became much more popular. It's still probably like around 25 to well, 20-25% of overall beauty purchases. In some markets, obviously, like especially in APAC, it's bigger. But it's the channel which also allows to use a lot of AI being incorporated in the purchasing process from the recommendation perspective, chatbots, etc., etc. So this channel is also benefiting from AI, and the Gen Z, which is much more savvy in terms of the way they use AI and the way they prompt and the way they create the requests. Because it's not only like, what's I don't know, what's the best product for the dry skin, etc. They're almost like creating with the help of the AI, like their beauty routine, like bringing the data about themselves and asking like very specific questions. And then the more they ask, the more they work with ChatGPT, etc. I was quite inspired, like seeing also how people build their diets on like with ChatGPT, providing like a lot of information about themselves. And ChatGPT can give you like the menu for the next few days of what you actually need to eat. It's the same way for instance, for your skin. And there's like quite a lot of devices now as well, and applications which allows you to analyze your skin and provide you recommendation in terms of like what is the best products for you to use today or tomorrow or like the day after tomorrow, depending on your skin condition. So as you rightly said, that's really important for the companies to be on the top of what is happening, like with ChatGPT, Perplexity, like a Google, any like AI related things at the moment, because if you don't understand the mechanics of how the people get the advice on specific beauty products, you might be just somewhere there and you will never be on the top of the list when the certain questions are asked. And my understanding, and I've read some materials. I'm not a specialist in that specifically, but I was learning this from from the strategic perspective. And my understanding specifically on AI is that there's a lot of information which is used from the different types of forums, magazines, articles, uh, different types of advices provided like on different social forums. But it's by no means normally the brand pages, right? So whatever wonderful information you put on your branded page, it might not be exactly the one that AI will use to provide specific recommendations. So you have to become a specialist in optimizing the way AI is actually getting information about your product, and be in those sources of information which are being leveraged by ChatGPT, for example.
Yeah, I mean, that is a real challenge when, you know, websites like Reddit have a ton of domain value and they are cited even when you're using like an AI deep research tool. And those are just people talking, but it's also that opportunity for brands to elevate the stories they put out there to attract the right influencers organically, not just the paid influencers. Um, One of the things that I always fall for, and I see influencers, like real influencers use it, and then plus just my peer group influencer, are tools. Like you were saying, to analyze your face, to analyze your skin. That is because it's immediately adding value to my purchase decision. It's building confidence. I have the opportunity to test it before I buy. I can click through and read different reviews on the branded website and other websites. So I agree. It's so important to know how to optimize your content, and it's also just so important to, again, be customer centric and say, what kind of tools, content, experiences can we put out there for everyone to touch, feel, so that when they talk about our product, it's coming from some valid information, valid and real experiences, and not hopefully increasing the accuracy of conversation overall.
No, exactly. And the only thing is, like, as you mentioned earlier, there is obviously limitations with AI. Depending on how you ask the question, you might get a specific answer, right? That's why it's also it's not fully controllable, even if you are taking care of like the right content being placed in the right areas, like which are leveraged, like websites which are leveraged by the AI tools. The question is also like how the user going to ask the question. And then the answer is going to be very much related to the prompt that you are using. And then asking the same thing in a different way might bring you the different answers, which is also like this variability is a bit of an interesting thing because that's not exactly the same as it used to be when you were just using like the Google search, right? Like you ask
Yeah.
the question and basically it brings you on the top based on the specific algorithms, like specific articles or like websites, etc., etc. And then the user is deciding on what makes sense versus what doesn't make sense. In the AI, depending on the prompt that you formulated, you're actually receiving like a very much curated type of thing, and it's a bit of a still a black box on how this whole thing is managed internally.
So we're almost coming up on time, but I wanted to slip in one more question. We've talked a lot about the changing audience and generations and their behaviors and how they access and research information and where they buy. We definitely talked a lot about the impact of AI on those generations, on the buying habits, and as a tool to better understand your customers, use those insights to inform product, logistics, operations, and everything across your business. Are there any other big areas of trends or change that you see coming in 2026 that will impact retail, online, and or the beauty industry overall?
I think it's less on the technology side, but it's more on the behavioral side because obviously, what we also need to take into account is like the macroeconomic conditions and what's happening overall, like with consumer confidence. And in the previous years, with the high inflation, high price increases, you can hear it everywhere that many of the brands push the prices too high to the point that consumers do not believe anymore that the products are actually rightly priced at this point. And so it seems to be like that the companies push the prices too high. And at the same time, with all these AI tools and the opportunities to research, etc., consumers are definitely more equipped, more than ever equipped, also to recognize the real like value, and they look at this value from a very specific perspective as well, like what are the benefits that they are getting from these products, and whether that's the ingredients that they want to apply on their skin, etc., and to use. So the combination of the two, I think it puts quite some pressure on the brands as well, will be putting pressure on the brands in the future because you cannot anymore like push prices. You really need to be smart in the way you basically price your products, even if you have like the significant cost of business increases, etc., etc. The consumer will not buy just this anymore. There has to be a very good combination and understanding of the value for money and the benefits the consumers get. So I think that will be really critical in the next year. And then of course using the artificial intelligence for the benefit of what you mentioned, like is cutting costs. For me, it's more like bringing efficiency, and helping the consumer also to feel like this efficiency. So it's not like only in the products, but it's also in the profits, but it's also in the prices that consumers see in the markets, in the quality of the products that they have, in better targeting for their specific needs, and in really being like a more consumer-centric company. So that would be like the whole combination of these things. It will be like really critical in the next year. And then from the trends perspective, there are many things which are happening and will continue to happen also from the geographical perspective, with the Korean beauty brands like really being on the rise and getting popular. And the reality is like some of the elements that you see there in terms of like research and development, and that's pretty amazing. But also the Chinese brands, which are also raising quite a lot and also have a lot of interesting elements. So there's a lot of challenges for the beauty companies. There's a lot of competition, and it will continue to be this way. And there will be also continuous blurry line in between different types of channels. There's no such a thing as for prestige beauty companies. There's no such a thing as the prestige channels anymore. It's like everything is pretty much blurred. Consumer shop everywhere. They have all the information in their hands, like with ChatGPT, etc., etc. So it's quite a sophisticated environment to manage and to navigate.
Well, this has been a very fun and I would say insightful packed conversation packed with insights. So I hope that all the listeners can take away some great action steps for 2026 and how to use data and insights and AI to get closer to the consumer, to show up in ways that benefit and value that consumer across channels everywhere and anywhere. And then also as they look to build out product roadmaps and improve efficiency internally, but also back to the benefit of the consumer. I actually, when you said that, that's a we haven't talked about that yet, that consumer expectation that prices should be lower. But we are seeing that not just in retail, but across industries, because not only do they not trust the price, because they just feel like it's only gone up and up and up. But also they're like, well, if you're cutting all this cost, where is the
Yeah,
benefit to me? Like why they got you just put out this press release that you cut all this cost, you automate everything out, but why am I paying more? So I think that's something every professional industry is going to have to think about, even though, as we know on the inside, there's a lot of investment going into
of course.
reimagining brand experience and reimagining what you can do for customers. So prioritization of how you deliver value and where value efficiency or the consumers benefit from efficiency is going to be really interesting to see play out next year.
No, totally. And I totally agree with you in terms of investments because artificial intelligence, it doesn't come for free, right? There is a
Right.
cost to this. And there's also like a lot of conversations at the moment that also like this whole AI element will require significant electricity, like power generation, etc. So there's a lot of things and a lot of things that the companies will have to think about in the future. But in the short term, you're totally right. And I think the consumers will have this feeling that there has to be a certain fairness in terms of like, we companies been pricing too much in the past. And you can clearly see this, hear this about luxury industry. Then people just saying like all these videos about like Louis Vuitton bags or Hermes bags being like, produced somewhere else at very tiny like cost comparing to the price that they've been sold. So it's quite obvious that consumers think about this. There's a lot of dupes in the markets as well because people just don't see the reason why should I buy the original product if I can get something very much similar
Mm-hmm.
at much lower price.
Yep.
So pricing is a big topic, that's for sure. For the next year, that would be one.
Yes. Yeah, we just got back from New York City and we missed our subway stop. And when the stop we got off of in Soho was the area where all the knockoffs are. And it's the first time my daughter had seen like this phenomenon. I mean, it's Christmas in New York, so it was packed wall to
Mm,
wall. And I have never seen like that many people in a one place at a time. But what really struck me was that it was an older crowd, a more mature crowd.
mm,
And then when we made it through, which felt like forever, because the when we got to the branded stores, it was a younger crowd.
mm.
And my daughter herself really gravitates towards specific brands and at different price points. But you see, when people really value the brand, they are prioritizing the value they get out of the experience of being
Yeah,
seen, of wearing that brand, of being
yeah,
associated to those values. uh, where she was like, why would anyone buy the knockoff? Because then it's like to her, she's like, that's not the real experience. It's just
yeah,
gonna like fall apart and be short term. And
yeah,
it was like it was really interesting to see that play out. And she was like, why don't the brands walk down the street and shut this down? It's like, I'm like, sometimes it's just a totally different audience. But to your point, like, look at all the people in these branded stores. It is a different experience. There's lighting's different. We're not cold. We're not on a street. We're able to try things on. We can pull up their app that they gave us and see what it looks like on me with my measurements. To your
yeah,
point, mixing that digital and physical. But that's going to be so, being able to weigh price with making sure that experience continues to deliver while you're paying that price is definitely going to be the
And
challenge
and
in
and
26.
and there is exactly the question. So where do you invest the money? Do you invest the money into not increasing the price for your consumer, for instance, and kind of keep it and try to give a bit of benefits to your consumer, or you actually invest your money into bringing more experience in the stores to bring the consumer and to explain the consumer, well, you know what? It's not only a product you're paying for, you're actually paying for this whole experience. And of course, for the younger generation, the experience is very important and critical because they really all about like this retailtainment, the retail experience, etc. So this is where I also start seeing like all the brands opening like the cafes, like serving some crazy things in their stores and imagining different types of events there. But that's the thing because that's all investment, and then the question is like where do you put your money? So what's going to bring you the best result in the future? And this is and the answer is also like you need to know your consumer. So
Yes,
that's the only answer.
it's absolutely true. And I would say the brands who are investing in those cafe experiences, the one extreme example I saw was this Jelly Cat Cafe. And this is all my daughter wanted to do. And I don't understand why a teenager wants a stuffed animal that's $60. Beyond me. But so I waited for the times to be released. And I'm usually very good. If there's something like you got to sign up, you got to be on it, and we're only allowing 50 people in, I think 95%, maybe a couple of times that I can remember, I get in. I had
Mm,
6 different devices going to get into that darn Jelly Cat Cafe and make my reservation, and I did not get in. And it shows you where you're at in the queue. And I
yeah.
picked different times. Every single one of my times, I was behind 200 in line.
Oh well.
So that means at the moment when they announced that they were opening up at one store in New York City, just one location, there was over 200 people waiting in each line just to make the reservation. But we walked by and I was, like, I'm not in this generation. I'm like, I do not understand what is happening, but man, this brand is doing a phenomenal job of
Yeah.
creating a highly sought after physical experience that clearly justifies the price of the product.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah. So it'll be exciting to see if more of those experiences come to life. I actually just appreciated that we were out and shopping so much and having so many different branded experiences. I mean, it's Christmas in New York, so there are branded experiences everywhere. But then she was off the phone, off games. Like, I also think there's benefits to
Yeah.
experiences, and it's a real opportunity for companies moving forward.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Totally agree with you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. And if people want to reach out to you directly, where can they find you?
Well, I'm in LinkedIn.
Yes. And,
No.
they could see your impressive background. And for listeners, Irina's name is spelled Irina. And last name is Kulikova. And you can see that spelling on our website at modop.com, modop.com, or search Leader Generation on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts to hear this episode and all of the other Leader Generation episodes. So, Irina, thank you again.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful end of the year and best of luck as we head into 2026.
Thank you. Same to you.